So, hello, I am Sylvia de Fanti, and
I'm Ilenia Caleo. I am a performer and an activist of Teatro Valle. And also an independent researcher.
And I am Sylvia de Fanti. I'm an actress and an activist, food tour guide as well, and an activist especially of the experience of the Teatro Valle occupato in Rome. You will see some pictures that will just give you an idea. First of all, we focused this speech on the economic alternative model, even though it's not my specialization or Ilenia's actually, but that is actually one of the most important things concerning how the discourse of economies was built during the occupation, so non-specialization. So, very briefly, I like to use the metaphor of acting, of course, being actors, and I would like to start from the beginning. So what were basically the needs that we needed to act out, how these needs became practices during the occupation, how these practices invented new tools in order to organize the economical life internal to the occupation, and how these tools could have been even more based on a concrete territory if that experience for the moment wasn't closed. So imagine that the stage is open on a street, so the audience and the stage are always intertwined and connected, and this is the most important image to have in your mind during the speech. So basically, what happened at the very beginning, we got in for the rights, for the autonomy of the artistic work, for the protection of the independency of art, creativity, and a new idea of intellectual property. We wanted to not consider anymore the artistic work a privilege, but actually a right, primary right, culture as a primary right. We entered that place because there were cuts in public funds and culture, so a big competition, the reducing of resources available, and we wanted to deal with government matters, basically introduce a self-government in culture, taking care of what is ours. Occuparci di ciò che è nostro was one of our claims. We wanted the recognition of our intermittent status and ensure the accessibility, the more as possible, to culture. These were the needs. So where did we start? The occupation of the Valle started from these radical desires, and I am avoiding to tell you all the more dramatic percentages of the line of poverty and how actually the workers of art and entertainmental culture are prominently under the poverty line in Italy. So basically, we started to experiment, starting from those needs. Of course, we're talking about experiments, so partiality, non-neutrality. We were illegally occupying a space, so another variable that has to be considered. So maybe imperfect economies, but the starting point was the idea also of sustainability and trying to not reproduce only a form of volunteering work. Actually, all the work and the economic system that happened there was based on relation, qualitative relations, and on a live, shared, constant exchange of knowledges. So cycles of self-education, self-training moments that were diffusive, always opened, that allowed this shared knowledge to become and to introduce very clearly a non-division of labor. So non-organized roles, non-specializations. So work was very fluid and mobile. We have several examples, but there's not the time now. So the participation of the, not the audience, but of the citizens, of an active citizenship, was pretty much encouraged by the fact that the theater was open 24 hours a day, and that everyone was invited and actually allowed himself to take care of what they thought was there. So not only artists, but also an average citizenship. And this happened through the differentiation of many activities: workshops, seminars, professional training, shows, residencies. Everything was open, lectures, concerts. Everything was programmed for different genres and transversal, also talking about the social class. And this is another very important point. And not only, it was in a way creating not only a community, but the communities. And also the alliances with a very formal institution or university of cultural institution. And everything was happening at the beginning through the practices. So it was happening in a very informal way. But this happened to build a community and of course also a way to empower the community that was living the occupation of Valle to create and invent and experiment some tools. So the work, the labor was basically very personal, even though interchangeable. We tried to avoid the distinction between immaterial and material work, even though it's still, I think, we think a discussion that is alive. We tried to jump, again, the class, gender and ethnical, thank you, and the distinction between the, how we could say, the very competent activities and the ones that requested less competence. So in this especially we try to interchange. Of course we try to avoid the reasoning and then discussing around the salary and a wage based on hours of work. And so trying to give ourselves different kind of measurements. Well, what was the kind of income actually? Of course, we're talking about, first of all, of an income of passion, the feeling of commoning, and something that regards more maybe a joyful existence, as Federica Giardini states in one of her articles, the using and multiplying of the conditions of living that actually was a very, and the first, we could say, return as an income. Of course, there were returns in terms of material life, living there, sleeping there, cooking, eating, and, of course, participating to all the activities that were there. So how did we act out those principles? I will briefly just take some examples of the tools that were basically, a guaranteed system of remunerations for all the companies, actors, performers, workers that came in and participated to the place. The fact that part of the money coming from the quota of complicity, that was basically maximum 8 euros for a show, for example, was given directly to the author. So we skipped the monopoly of the Collecting Rights Society in Italy, which is very heavy and it still has a sort of mafia organization. We produced, which is another chapter that is very complicated. We built a new status, juridical status, together with a lot of people that are also here, like Mattei, and we built something that could be based on a self-government community that was the foundation, is the foundation of Teatro Valle occupato. We established independent platforms of shareholding crowdfunding, and it's of course the most important things that now we can't talk about because it's too late, but was the creating mutual cassa, found. And so the mutualism was something that every company at the end of the show had to give a part of the money, even if it was very little. At the end of the year, we would have talked about it and decided what to do. That could have been to cover the expenses of if some company wouldn't be able to cover them, or invent new productions. And this in an optic of course, not just of solidarity, but also the wish was to enable sanity and different kind of educations and welfare to be allowed and guaranteed. So that was in the future the way we thought that mutualism system would have become useful. And then there was a time of complicity, that is another thing, and it's too long. So I guess there will be time to talk more about it, because 3 years are long and 12 minutes are small. But thank you very much.
Mattei.